And if you want to hear any lore, and I mean any lore whatsoever, join the Patreon. Even at $1 a month, you get to pick. You get to have a hand in picking every week's lore. Also, join the Discord, because sometimes I'll ask there, or leave a YouTube comment. But this week, by way of Patreon, even though I chose it, this week's lore is on Nick Valentine. If you've played Fallout 4, which I'm assuming you have if you're here, you know about Nick Valentine. One of the first promo images I remember is seeing Nick walk in Scholarly Square, however it's pronounced. I still can't say it. Seeing him walk through Valentine's detective agency, you've probably seen. And if I remember correctly, he was one of the first characters or things that was rendered for the idea of Fallout 4. He's originally, now Nick Valentine is a cop. He's a detective from Chicago pre-war. And he was involved in Operation Winter's End to find infamous mobster Eddie Winter, a crime boss who allegedly owned a sub shop, probably to wash money. He was brought to Boston, a Chicago native, like I said. Eddie Winter is a Boston mobster, and Nick is taken to Boston to investigate. Now, Eddie finds out about Nick and his fiancée, Jennifer Lance, and Eddie Winter kills his girlfriend in an act of revenge for trying to encroach on his organized crime business. Now, the BADTFL, or the Bureau of Alcohol, Drugs, Tobacco, Firearms, and Lasers, the BADTFLA, had found out information that Eddie Winter knew about Nick Valentine and the missus. But they didn't put the pair of them, they didn't put Nick and didn't put his fiancée Jen into witness protection out of fear that this would compromise the investigation. And on top of all of this, Eddie Winter had made a deal with the BADTFL to lock up his constituents so he would get less time. Now, I'm not going to go super into Eddie Winter because we're not here to talk about Winter. We're here to talk about Nick Valentine. But weeks before the bombs drop, Operation Winter's End ends. And Nick, because of all of this traumatic event of his girlfriend dying, him feeling responsible, he develops severe PTSD. And to treat his severe PTSD, he goes to the Institute, the Institute of Technology, later to just be called the Institute, in Boston. The Fallout equivalent of MIT, it's CIT, the Commonwealth Institute of Technology. He goes there and gets his brain scanned. Now, this is used for Nick's personality later on, which I'll get into in a bit. The Institute, the bombs drop, the Institute is relatively safe inside of Boston, and they start their synthetic human program, as you probably know. So they make 2 Gen 2 synths that are prototypes to try out a new sort of way of making synths and seeing what they can do. There's 2 types of synths that are built for this, 2 prototypes. One being the prototype that is Nick Valentine. His prototype, there are memories implanted, tons of different memories implanted into this synth body. And a brother who later goes by the name Dima, who is allowed to make his own memories and his own thoughts and his own actions just from living. This all happens more than 100 years before 2287. Dima and Nick almost become brothers. Dima refers to Nick as his brother because they're born together. They kind of do the same things together. They develop a brotherly bond. Both of them are being experimented on, and Dima discusses plans for escape. But before they can escape, the Institute uploads Nick Valentine, the cop, fully to this synth, this Gen 2 prototype synth. This is incredibly confusing, I understand. But this is when Nick Valentine becomes Nick Valentine. He was now identifying as the pre-war cop, Nick Valentine. Now, 200 years later, Nick Valentine just wakes up. The real Nick Valentine died sometime after the bombs dropped. So he's gone, but his memories, his thoughts, up until the point that CIT scanned them, exist somewhere in their databanks. And now this is what they're doing. They're trying to replicate that person. He wakes up quote-unquote wakes up and attacks Dima. Dima knocks him out and leaves him in a pile of garbage, and he wakes up an amount of time later and walks across the wastes. So imagine this. Imagine a man. Essentially, this man's memories end with Jennifer. That's it. His girlfriend, Jennifer. They end there. He has his entire life. He has childhood. He has his first kiss. He has prom. He has his first car. The time he got evicted. He has the police academy. Him being a detective. All of this in his memory. And then Winter's End ends. And his PTSD gets his brain scanned. And then his memories stop there. But that human goes on and then dies, and then 200 years later, this consciousness of memories wakes up, and it's in a world he does not understand, in a body he does not recognize. He walks the wastes for years, and due to his prototype brain, he has a smaller amount of memory and winds up eventually forgetting about his brother Dima. Most of the Commonwealth shared an equal amount of disdain and interest in Nick, but synths. Eventually, he came across a small community, and there was a mechanic there who was able to fix him up a bit. Inside of this community, there really wasn't much that Nick talked about in-game or on the wiki, and I get all of my lore off of fallout.fandom.com, the Nukipedia, if you will. On the wiki, it doesn't say much about the town other than he befriends a child by the name of Jim, one of his earliest friends. He later leaves the community. He leaves the settlement. He wants to go see what else is out there. And years later, he returns and sees that it's been ransacked and destroyed by raiders. So Nick eventually makes his way to Diamond City. As you know, if you've played Fallout 4, there was a man by the name of Henry Roberts who was the mayor before McDonough. And Nick finds the mayor's daughter. He was just stumbling about in the waste and all of a sudden comes upon a woman, a young woman, who was kidnapped. These raiders all point guns at Nick and are saying, oh, we're going to shoot. And he understands with his quick wit of being a detective that this young woman is in distress and possibly kidnapped. And he just kind of looks at them and says that he has a bomb inside of his chest and just goes beep, 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 and like walks towards them. And then all of a sudden they scurry away. And then he takes the daughter's mayor back to Diamond City. The mayor rewards him with a house, and the citizens at first were very much against a synth living there, but this synth just saved the mayor's daughter, and he felt it was the only way to repay him. He essentially gains the respect of them by becoming the handyman, and he fixes small things up around Diamond City, but there was a woman, his big case, his big break, that really made the people of Diamond City love him, is there was a woman who lived there who was presumed dead, and Nick, being a detective, goes out and finds that she is only really just run away with her lover. That's it. She just was cheating and left. After this big case, people stop asking Nick to fix little things up around Diamond City, and they just start asking him to find people. By 2287, I don't want to get too much into what he does in game. You are here because you probably know a little bit about Nick because of playing with him side by side. By 2287, he runs Valentine's detective agency with his assistant Ellie Perkins. He's a smooth-talking, fast-hacking, quick hands, not too shabby with a revolver type, and always keen with a quip. The events of the Soul Survivor happens where either Nate or Nora finds him in Vault 114, and they assist him against finding the woman Darla, who is teamed up with and run away with Skinny Malone. And Skinny Malone is an old friend, and I've talked about Skinny Malone a little bit in the past, him being a triggerman. He had a respect for Nick because they were friends, but also because I think Nick respects him as a businessman, and Skinny Malone respects Nick as someone just doing his job. You could take Nick to Far Harbor, he'll meet Dima, and Dima will tell him a little bit about the past, about what he remembers of the two of them. But in the back of Nick's mind, one thing just won't go away. One thought haunts him, and it's the thought of his girlfriend, and Eddie Winter. And even though it's 200 years later, and he's not in the body he remembers, that will not leave him. He cannot get the idea of that out of his head. Now, that's everything I have written down, but like I said, I get all of my lore off of fallout.fandom.com, the Nukipedia, if you will. And I'd like to read some quick notes off that, just some stuff that I might have missed and or smaller notes that I just want to double check on. Fallout 4 suffers from a thing that I like to call main character syndrome, where every companion thinks they're the main character and they just don't die. Even though he can't die, he has a death quote where he says, "Not like this." Despite being an early model synth and made of gears and sprockets, as he says, he can actually be healed with a stim pack or revived with a stim pack as if he was made with flesh. Nick Valentine will comment whenever the mysterious stranger appears in VATS with the mysterious stranger perk. If one finds the case file under Valentine's bed, it will detail the notes of the mysterious stranger case that dates back to the original Fallout timeline. The file will note the really old rumors about the mysterious stranger appearing in Shady Sands, where the Vault Dweller assisted the residents in the first Fallout. The only exception is New Vegas, which is not mentioned. Preston Garvey is given gifts from people saying thank you for your previous help, and Nick gets the same, but he refuses to take them. Also, he prays at churches, which is a nice little touch that I like, that it's just something that he kept from the pre-war. There's a random encounter where a group of raiders will go to attack, and right before they attack, if you're with Nick, they'll stop and go, "Oh, this is Nick." And Nick's like, "Oh, well, thanks for not shooting. I'm happy that you made something of yourself. We're just going to walk away," he says. If taken to Acadia after the sole survivor has suggested Nick not accept Dima as family, Dima may say, "Good to see you again, brother," which Nick replies with, "I'd prefer to keep it Nick and Dima for now." If Nick has chosen to accept Dima, Nick will say, "It's good to see you too, Dima." Nick's voiceover in Far Harbor is somewhat different from the tone and pitch of his voice in the base game, being slightly deeper and slower in delivery. Although voice actor Steven Russell returned for Far Harbor, Nick sounds moderately different in the two appearances due to different recording sessions happening at different times. Russell also voiced Dima in Far Harbor, and the two characters will interact with each other. According to Emil Paglarulo, Nick was one of the first characters created for Fallout 4. An original design document contained concepts for Nick even before the setting of the game was finalized. His origins lie in a sketch by I'm so sorry. I know what it's like to have a hard last name. Sketch by Adam Orowitz during the early pre-production of Fallout 4, which describes the idea for a scrapped-up metallic Kendall detective, inspired by the X-Files. Emil then created a deeper concept for Nick based on his love for noir detective films. Emil Paglarulo, I'm so sorry. I can never say your name correctly, and Jeff Gardner have both stated that Nick is their favorite character in the entirety of the Fallout series. Nick quotes Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven when he first sees the Pridwin. He also quotes Percy Bysshe Shelley's sonnet Ozymandias if he is brought to General Atomic's Galleria. If he is present during the explosion of the nucleus, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," the exact sentence quoted by J. Robert Oppenheimer after witnessing the first nuclear test detonation. So that's all I have for you pretty much on Nick Valentine, a character who I think grabbed everybody almost immediately. A character that had so much style and panache to him, someone who you can actually see maybe existing in these worlds. He's serious enough to be a character, and he's also silly enough to be a character. He brings the best of both, and he's just a smooth-talking, sly guy. That's Nick Valentine, and that's all of the lore I have for you for this week.